I've chatted a bunch on
Hey,
Discord. It's great to finally, say hi. Same
Yes.
with you, Carlux.
we are live coming at you from Gildificon, and we are going, or Gildificon, however you like to pronounce it. We're going to be talking to our illustrious panel about the differences between novelization and serialization of your books. This is a great panel to listen in on if you're curious about how that works and what you should be doing as an author. So, to start us off, we're going to introduce all of our different panelists. They're going to give you a little bit of information about who they are and what they do, and then we're going to get right into it. So, JM, why don't we start with you and work our way around?
Hello, everybody. My name is J.M. Clark, and I write a couple of different novels. The Old Boy in the Yard would be Mark of the Fool. That's a novel I've been writing for about 3 years and have been publishing on Amazon for about one. Started serialized and then ended up here. And then the new baby is Runeseeker that I co-wrote with Carter J. Thompson, and that has dropped on Amazon just over a week ago now. So, and both of them had the serialization to publication pipeline, and I'll be talking about both. Okay,
Awesome.
that's me.
Tao.
Hi, I'm Tao Wong. I write a whole series of different lit RPG works, including the System Apocalypse. I'll be talking mostly about the current serialization system book that I'm working on, or will be publishing in December on Amazon, and that's available on Starlit Publishing itself, called Climbing the Ranks.
Fantastic. And you didn't say anything about being Canadian. I'm shocked and dismayed. Selkie.
Hey, I'm Selkie. I write Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons, and that's pretty much all I write. I have I want to be able to split my time and focus among several projects, but I just have the one right now. Although I'm plotting in the background, and that's pretty much it. My story is currently the number one popular this week's story on Royal Road because I decided, hey, my KU numbers are a little down. Let's hop over to Royal Road briefly, get everyone to read my story again, and then hop back off. And that's me.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Last but certainly not least, Lauren.
Hi all, I am Lauren Ryburn, also known as Caberlex. So I started writing on Royal Road back in 2017. So my very first work was a serial called Apex Predator. And that has been on hiatus for a while and is unfinished and never taken to Amazon. But for my second story, which I also started on Royal Road, I have brought that to Amazon and to a wider audience, and that is called The Menoct Loop. Aside from that, I also have a publishing company, Timeless Wind Publishing, where I try to publish all of the books that I read on Royal Road and love.
And she is amazing to have a conversation with in a crowded restaurant. I had that privilege when we were at Dragon Con, and it was a lot of fun. So, got to say, really cool person to meet in real life, IRL. So, yeah, let's get into this. We are talking about going from a serialized to a novelized. What's the difference? Where should you be starting? If it's something that you should be considering when you're writing your serialization, or if you want to skip the serialization and go with novelization as well, and whether that should be something that people should be considering. So we're going to get right into it. If you do have questions, those of you who are hanging out and listening to this live, please pop them in the comments because we would love to answer those if you have any burning questions about what we're talking about. Even if it might be a little bit off topic, that might work out as well. Hey, KT, how are you doing? JD, it's good to see you as well. So let's get into this. Tell me a little bit about the process that you guys had in your experiences with going from what obviously all of you have done, writing a serialized book and then turning that into a novelized format. Let's do this. Why don't you give me one thing particular that you found to be the most beneficial or the most pertinent in doing that transition for each of you? And Lauren, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think for me, when I first started writing both of the series that I've written so far, I never even thought about publishing on Amazon. It was a little bit of a different space back then on Royal Road. Like you hadn't really seen the mass exodus of a lot of the bigger stories, like Hugh fights with monsters, Defiance of the Fall, The Primal Hunter, etc. So there wasn't as much of a precedent. I think amongst serialized authors of taking your book to Amazon. So for me, I was just writing for fun, and I was just happy to get people looking at it. So I definitely started as a hobbyist. So I think that ultimately made it really easy for me to just take it chapter by chapter, and I wasn't really thinking about the larger narrative and thinking of things in like a book format. Um, so that's just how I got started. I think now, as I've continued to write, though, it's definitely, I think, easier to think in terms of like, hey, like when is this arc going to end, and how can I align that with the kind of size of a book that I want to publish for my series.
Mm. Selkie.
So, I did start with a similar thing where, it was pre, big exodus. I actually think in retrospect that I was one of the earlier ones to start going to Amazon, but I only put the book on Amazon. I didn't go to Kindle Unlimited at the time. And I was only putting the book on Amazon because there was the big Mother of Learning scandal where someone had stolen Mother of Learning and put it on early, the first time. And I said, wait a minute, my best protection against this is to have my book on Amazon first, then nobody can steal it. And maybe someone will throw me a couple extra bucks for, continuing to write. So I started there, and one of the things I did as well, just the one piece of advice to give is I studied what everybody else was doing. I literally read all the stories, no matter how much I liked them, no matter how much I hated them. If they were popular or well done, I just sort of studied them and wrote notes of what are they doing well, what aren't they doing well, what are the complaints, what do people like, what is the common thread of enjoyment, and what can I take from that to use myself. And so that's sort of the thing I would say is, study what people are doing. Even if you don't like it, study what they're doing.
That's a great thought. That's really good. Jam.
So, for me, I had a little bit of a different journey when it came to this than my colleagues Lord and Selkie. I had originally intended to publish Fool onto Amazon eventually. The very, very shortly after it started doing well on Royal Road. So I'd always had it in mind to do it as a form of book. I was thinking of it in long term. I have trouble writing in a serialized format, to be honest, and I always think of things as novels. So that transition was easy. What was not so easy was realizing that pacing between the web novel format and actually a published book varies a little bit in practice. Like when I finished my original book one, that book was over 400,000 words, and I was horrified. So then it was up to me and my editors to try and arm wrestle a point where we could actually break it in half and make it into books that people could read within one lifetime. So that is sort of my journey. So it's something that I keep in mind these days. I've gotten a lot better at keeping things within like an actual book length. They're still like 250,000 word monsters, but hey, it's better than the past. That's the way I look at it. But yeah, that's me.
That's fantastic. Tao.
Okay. God, I've been in and out of serialization for a bit. My first few series, the System Apocalypse and Adventures of Barad series, I actually wrote on Royal Road in 2017. It's been a while. And I kind of, well, they weren't really constructed as serials back then. I was just writing for fun. And then I threw it up on Amazon when I realized I actually had a book up there. And there wasn't as much consideration, I think, as there is in discussion these days about, whether you should be in Kindle Unlimited, you should be wide, So I did one of both. I had AOB wide when I put it out, and then I had System Apocalypse through Kindle Unlimited. And then I stopped writing on Royal Road, partly because the way I wrote somewhat changed, because as I was going through the editing process, a lot of the things that I wanted to change was coming true. And partly that was because I didn't keep enough notes, but partly for foreshadowing purposes and whatnot. So that's, I think, one of the major things when I was switching over was just the way it looked, and how you write is so weird when you're, I find, between writing a novel and writing for a serial. Like Climbing the Ranks right now is written specifically in a serial format. So the chapters are a lot shorter in general. There's a lot more ongoing hooks and so on and so forth. So when, even though I'm pulling it off and going onto Amazon, it's actually going wide, and the book is going to stay on Starlit Publishing rather than going through KU.
Okay, yeah. That brings up an interesting question that I've considered with this, and I wanted to get your perspective on it, all of you. Do you feel that there needs to be a change in what you've written that's serialized into novelization? Is it just copy and paste, or do you do another edit or a pass, or change things up, or like you were saying, Clark, about how you needed to find a break to parse down book one from 400,000 words down to 200,000 words. How has that changed for you now? Like a lot of you that just started writing serials and then were like, oh, wait, this can be a book. Did you consider that? Was that something that now you feel is important and it wasn't back then? Has it changed for you? Tao, why don't you start with this one?
Sure. I think I'm a little luckier in the sense that I think in arcs. And I think some of the bigger writers have talked about it too, where they, serial writers, where they talk about having multiple arcs. I think Jeff Brink, Fustifier, when he was writing about it, he talks about having, mini arcs all linked together. So if you have those arcs and you have a major arc, you can, it's not as bad for splitting it, I find. I think the big issue, as JM actually mentioned, at least for me, is writing serialization creates much more, has a lot more words going into this compared to if I try to write this same arc in a normal way. Well, for a novel, not a normal way, but yeah.
Selkie.
So for me, I sort of don't really, I consider myself to be a serial writer first. And, you can do lots of interesting things in a serial that you can't necessarily do in a traditional novel format. You can have, as I was saying, you've got the arcs, but usually at the end of a book, the arcs are mostly wrapped up, and then you sort of have to start the next one. In serial writing, though, you can start the arc, and halfway through it, you can start a second arc, and halfway through that, you can start a third arc, and you just have all of these multiple different things really going on and weaving together nicely. And I've always sort of kept in my mind, I am writing a web serial first. I just chop at nice places and call it a book. But there'll often be awkward threads hanging out because I'm writing a serial first and foremost. And I feel, if I try to split my attention and try to do a serial book at the same time, I'll just be a bad version of both, as opposed to be the best version of the thing I want to be.
That's great. I wanted to ask about that just quickly, though, on a side note. Have you noticed, or has there been any kind of negative feedback on the book side? Feeling like, and how do you handle that?
So what's really nice is I'm not the only person doing this. A lot of the older, bigger, the behemoths of the genre, He Who Fights with Monsters, Primal Hunter, Defiance of the Fold, Azareth Healer, yada yada, they've all done it. So when they read my book and they get the same thing, I just get oh, it's another one of those, former web novels moved into, Amazon. So I sort of get to be a zebra and hide with the pack, basically, where when everyone else is doing it, I get a free pass for doing it as well. And I help everyone else also get the free pass.
That's awesome. Lauren.
So I think I want to just extend a little bit on the example of Defiance of the Fall, for instance, as kind of a poster child of a serial where it was just kind of chopped. And I say that in the nicest way. For people who don't know, Defiance of the Fall is incredibly successful, and it has readers who are dying to get the next book and who continue to just read through it. And I know this because I actually binged through it last year in like December, like the whole series. I was like, I can't stop. And one thing I noticed about it that was really interesting is that so they're like clear arcs, right? But like they're all in like a half arc offset. So like every book ends in the middle of an arc. Literally every single one ends in the middle of like an arc. It's like so you finish the last half of an arc and then you start the next half of like the next arc. And I actually asked him about this. I'm like, is this intentional? Because it's really good at like ensuring that every book ends on a cliffhanger, which makes people read the next book. And he said it was not intentional.
I think it was Defiance of the Fall that someone mentioned every fifth chapter, every Friday chapter without fail is a cliffhanger.
Yeah, he's really good at those. But like so like just on like an individual level, he's stringing you along. But at like the same time, like I'm a total believer that you can just do a chop. Like you should at least like end it nicely, like or like start it nicely. So like for instance, at least like add like a little bit of something on the end if you just literally do like a chop in the middle of nowhere and just like add like a cliffhanger or just like add like something that makes it feel like the last chapter of a book. Same with like the first chapter of like the next book. But I think readers can like complain, but if you're just talking about successful books that people love to read, I don't think it hinders enjoyment at all.
It's fascinating because I've never actually read Firstifier as an Amazon book, right? So I don't see that. That kind of chopping. I mean, most of the stuff that I've read hasn't actually been on Amazon itself. So it's interesting to see that you comment that he actually chopped it in half in the middle of an arc.
I was like so shocked. I'm like, why did you do this? I'm like, they're literally all half off. Like, if you literally just made like one book like 50K words shorter or 50K words longer, it literally would like perfectly align with like literally every book in the series. And that's just absolutely not what happened.
I wonder if he was just like, okay, we want this word count done, this word count down, this word count down. That's interesting. Because if it wasn't intentional, what was the intention behind deciding that's where those arbitrary chops were going to be? JM.
So, I sort of have two opinions on this. In the first, when I looked at Mark of the Fool, there was always that temptation, the way I look at it, to do a major edit when you go through. I will say that I'm lucky in that I don't really have any major regrets when it comes to the writing of that book and that series, but there's always the intention of, okay, well, if I just go through another pass and I read through, then I could do some major improvements, stuff I didn't catch. And to me, that's the devil speaking to you. And the only reason why I say that is because if you have a successful serial, it worked for a reason. And no matter what author you think you are, you will not be 100% sure of why that reason is. So if you go mucking about in the guts of your book and you change something major, you could end up breaking something unintentionally that people loved about the book. And you could think you're fixing it, but you had no idea what it was that actually worked there, and you ended up messing it up. So that's why I try to keep my edits fairly light when it comes to the publishing and serialization, that transferring process. Now, I will say that's not always the case. Overlord very famously had its most popular character created during the editing process of being transitioned from a web serial to a light novel series. So it can sometimes go the other way. But for the most part, I tend to be cautious about that. However, with Runeseeker, which was written over a longer period of time as novels first, like Carter and I went through the whole shebang, editing it back to front before even serializing it. So to me, if you have something that works, then be very careful of what you muck about with it. That's the way I look at it, at least.
Mm. And that's a very interesting thing to think about. I wonder though sometimes, and I'm not trying to disagree, but an alternative perspective on that is um, looking at it sort of like two different mediums,
Mhm.
although they're very, very closely related and similar because they are the written word. But we always look at something like uh, a novel being turned into a movie, and how they actually need to change things in order to make it work for that process. And in this, you might lose some people who are fans of what you did on Royal Road, but if you change it to the novelization to adjust for some of those things, yes, it might annoy people who've already read it on Royal Road, but will it give you uh, a new audience that will appreciate what you did in the new part? I just food for thought. I was thinking about that while you're saying this. We have a question from a Facebook user that I'm not sure I'd completely understand. I have a book, 100,000 words, and I have started posting on Royal Road. Do you believe this is a doable thing? I don't quite know how that's supposed to be translated, but if I can tack onto this, because this is something that I wanted to ask about. Um, People who are writing, do you, now that you've done both, recommend that all books should be started as a serialized form, or all books should be put on Royal Road or part of that and then put on as a novelization? Or is it something where they should very intentionally think about what kind of book they want to write and then from there decide that they should be going into a serial or going into a novel? Why don't we start with you, JM?
Actually, this is a lovely segue from that thing you pointed out just now, Steve. The thing is, I think you have to be conscious of the fact that serialization and novels require certain things that are different if they reach their maximum potential in the medium.
Mm,
And one thing I will say is that you have to pay attention when it comes to serialization with how people consume a fiction. You are going chapter by chapter. Someone is reading your work piecemeal 3 times a week, 5 times a week. And that often results in a very different experience than consuming a book in an afternoon.
mm,
So if you write with the intention of a novel, and because like very famously some novels have done kind of meh on Royal Road and then have gone on to slam hard on Amazon, and oftentimes you see when they make that transition, sometimes you have a slower start, or sometimes you have it so that each chapter isn't its own self-contained thing where you have your like little dopamine hit or something like that. Meanwhile, so people end up bored eating this book piecemeal over weeks at a time. But if you have it all together in one book, it's dynamite. So it's something I would say that if you have a book and it feels like a book, then you can put it up on serialization. But I would say to level your expectations. Whereas if you're just going pure serialization, then you can tailor the book to that experience and enjoy what results. But yeah, that would be my answer to that.
fantastic. Lauren, you look like you're chomping at the bit on this question, so I'm going to go to you.
No, I think I just really agree with a lot of what Jan was saying. Like, I think I personally really like the experience of putting books on Royal Road. I think it's really helpful to get feedback. Even if a book, like, quote, doesn't do well, you know, you've leveled your expectations because you wrote it as a book, not really a serial. You can still oftentimes get like really good comments. Like, even if a book is, again, written as a book, I think as long as it's like decently good, you're probably going to get a solid number of people who are commenting on it if you're able to you know to get it out there and get it on Rising Stars and get it before a bunch of eyes, which is in itself kind of a complicated process, but you know it's I think that when you're doing something like that, it's just a good experience too for like someone who's a newer writer, because sometimes you've just never gotten any feedback at all, or you just have no idea if your work is even good. And then all of a sudden you have people telling you, like, hey, this is actually good. I've read all the way through. You'll probably also have people telling you that your work is unburnable garbage. but it helps you, I guess, develop some thick skin, hopefully. I think that there are people though who like really don't like that feedback and really find it harmful and toxic and find it really destroys their motivation to write. And I think that if you're one of those people, you just have to know yourself and like stay away from serialization websites like Railroad.
Hmm. So do you think that that it's a good thing to post on there if you're looking for genuine feedback that you can handle, and then those people, I'm basically reiterating what you said because I had a question and then it got lost in the weeds of what I was saying. I'm sorry. Wanting to know when you're putting in the serialization and you're getting that feedback, how that can affect how you write the rest of the story, because you might have a plan or an idea of what you're going to do in that serialization. Then when the feedback comes in, is that a concern for you as authors that maybe they're going to change the way the course of the book was going to go? Or has it for you as you've been writing serializations changed how you're writing the book or the plot points or where things were going to move in your story that you had intended, even if it was cursorily in like the back parts of your brain?
I
Do you know
think
what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely can. I think that people have to be really careful because you don't just want to read like a negative comment and then be like, oh no, like I need to like change everything I was planning. You don't want to fall into that boat. Like ultimately, you have to take every single thing you ever see from readers with a grain of salt. But if there's like an overall pattern, like everyone seems to be agreeing that like, hey, this arc is going on for like too long, or like, oh my god, literally everyone hates a character with a burning feverish passion, and you're like, oh my god, like I did not expect people to hate this character, then maybe you would adjust, or plan accordingly.
I think it also depends on where you figure your target market is going to be at the end of the day. I mean, we talk about Royal Road as being the main web serial platform, but there are others out there. Wattpad is out there. Space Battles, Yonder, which pays people money to write on it, and they all have different target markets, and there's also different ways that you're looking at, creating money, revenue eventually afterwards, especially if you're writing a book, and so you just throw it up on Royal Road. That might not be the right target market for your work, and so worrying about those comments there might not be the right choice, right? Because that's, you're writing towards that market, not
Right.
towards any other ones that might be out there. So it's always worth knowing that, because as a, not sure, can't remember who it was that there have been books that have done really well off Royal Roads that didn't do that well on Royal Road itself. So it's kind of, you have to be careful about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's interesting.
there was
Selkie.
go ahead, Silky. Sorry.
So, Tom actually touched on almost exactly what I was going to say. Know your target and know what you have. If you are writing a steamy, shifter romance aimed towards women, Royal Road is not your target audience. The people you want to read your book are not there. You also have to define what is your metric of success. And generally, most people come down to eyeballs or money, which is actually the same thing, because your eyeballs to money ratio is going to be pretty consistent. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want from this? Who is my target audience, and where does my target audience, exist? And if your target audience is on Royal Road, if you have the sort of thing that'll interest them, that's the other thing. You could be targeting the lit RPG audience, but if you've got a 1,000-word short poem, that's not what the people on the website are looking for. You're not going to get anyone reading it there. So know what your metric of success is, know what your target audience is, know where it is, and then pick the right venue for your book. If you have an epic lit RPG fantasy that you plan on having span 2,000 chapters, Royal Road is your platform. Once again, going back to the steamy shifter romance, you're probably going to Wattpad, Scribble Hub, depending on how steamy it is, or just straight to Amazon. know what you have, talk to people. Everyone is very happy to tell you Royal Road is for X, Y, and Z. Wattpad is for X, Y, and Z. Scribble Hub is for A, B, and C. And they will help direct you to go talk to these people. They know exactly what you're doing and exactly what you want. So, that's my take on it is do your research sort of. If you're reading stuff on a site that you really like and you say, I want to write something like this and write something just like that, and it's the same as the number one popular story and the same as the number two popular story, you're going to do great. That's actually how I started. I was like, I really like this Azareth healer story that's at the top. What if the main character was actually a healer? That's literally my origin story.
If I could just want to add a slightly additional dimension on that one. Lorne, Selkie, Tao, your points were good. Very, very good about knowing your audience and especially knowing your metrics for success. Because another thing, too, is that you have to understand on serialization, most of your audience doesn't comment. So oftentimes, your commenters are your minority. And it can be very tempting to pay attention to a loud, angry minority. But if they're telling you to change the story in a direction that doesn't work, it's like what George R. R. Martin says. If someone figures out that the butler did it in a mystery halfway through the mystery and you panic and change it to the maid, the book no longer makes sense. And if you do that, people will notice, and then that silent majority that was enjoying what you were doing will get very loud very quick. So you have to be careful with that one.
That is a great point. And Selkie, you commented about this, and I'm thinking that this is a great time to hopefully have you guys address this, as you've welcomed people to ask questions and seek out advice, because it is a very warm and welcoming community. Do each of you have suggestions or advice to those people who are wanting to reach out to people on like do's and don'ts of how to reach out, like the proper etiquette of how to approach an author and say, hey, this I need help with, or this I need advice with? What would you say to them to make it be the best situation for them and for the people they're asking help from? Tal, why don't you start?
So I'm a bit weird in that I write a giant blog series on my website, mylifemytao.com. And so there's a whole bunch of business posts that I write about in there. So my first thing would be to tell people to go read that, because it's quite likely I've covered your question in there at some point. I've been writing this for like 6 years at some point, with stats and data and whatever. It's about a post a week, give or take. I take some weeks off because I have nothing to say. So there's a lot of stuff in there. So my first comment would be, go look at that. Obviously for some more recent data, like, hey, where do you go to write for serial places or whatever, that might be an easier one-off question, at which point there is the Lit RPG authors Facebook group that is, I believe, still up and running and active. So that's a great place to just drop a question, or to look at their or to run a search for old questions, because there's a lot of data there too.
That's a great point, is looking up data where people have already asked your question maybe 500 times. And so your question might be like, oh, seriously, if you didn't do any kind of research at all before asking the question. Lorne.
So generally when somebody is getting started and you can kind of tell that they probably need advice, typically it's going to be on Royal Road, because that's where I'm like looking at people who are writing stories. So I'll maybe even leave a comment if I see something pretty obvious. Like just like a week ago, I left a comment on a story that was on Rising Stars, pretty much telling them like, hey, you should maybe change your cover. Just maybe. Sometimes though, I'll also just direct message people and like say like, hey, like, I think you could really benefit from getting plugged into some author communities where you can like get feedback and get some more information and help to get you leveled up. So I'll send people Discord links then to like servers that I think will be helpful.
Silver pen.
Hey, other ones too. So the joke is that I'm the admin of the Silver Pen. But yeah.
Silky, so what would you say to people of the do's and don'ts of approaching established authors asking for advice?
So, almost a little like Lauren and Tao, I've done my own thing where I've basically, written my great big long list of, information, nailed it to my Discord and left it up there. Similarly, I sort of, I don't so much actively do it anymore, but I've got a large author community in my Discord, and I just sort of, have everyone jump in the same room, and I encourage people to talk with each other and do stuff. Uh, what I would say for someone who wants to approach an author, be polite, understand that they get a lot of this. See if, like what Tao was saying, they have any resources already available, because generally authors know we're all in this together and nobody else is going to help us. So we all sort of, I've noticed there's a strong uplift effect where authors generally try to help other authors. And so just be really polite. I will say on a personal pet peeve, and maybe other people have, similar things. A really polite message asking, hey, can you give me some help like this? I'm generally pretty receptive to. I start to raise my eyebrows and go, really? When someone's like, hey, we could do a shout out swap. You tell your 20,000 people about me and I'll tell my 2 people about you.
That sounds fantastic.
Oh,
A great deal.
Guys,
sorry,
just ask me directly, please.
just a quick note about reaching out if you're going to do it. For me, at least, I know email is a lot easier, or Discord. Don't do Facebook Messenger, please, dear God. I have so much spam messages coming in through Facebook Messenger from people that I am basically deleting most of those, because a lot of them are bots. So I cannot tell if you're a spammer or a bot, because the starting questions are almost always the same.
That's good to know, because I was feeling a little offended that you hadn't responded to any of my Facebook messages.
No, I'm sending you one right now.
Well, I mean, you talk like a bot so much.
I do have that tendency to talk like a bot. You're right. Jam.
All right. Everyone's mostly covered all the do's and don'ts for the most part, so I'll just get this one in. If you're contacting authors for help or anything else or connections, don't use a form letter. Like, we talk, and we talk a lot, and if I see a message come in and it basically reads, "Hello, author. How are you doing today? I hope this message finds you well. I have loved your story, name never mentioned, for a long time now," with no specific numbers. The first thing I'm going to do is go to my buddies and say, "Hey, did you get this message?" And 9 times out of 10, they did. And that's a good way to ensure I never speak to you again. So,
Also,
yeah.
I'll tell you right now, we laugh at them. We share them around and we laugh.
That's awesome. So to sum up, because this is something that I experience a lot. I have new narrators that are approaching me all the time, and they just say, "Hey, any advice you have for a new aspiring narrator? Can you tell me?" And it's like, come with me with specific questions. Do a little bit of research and don't just ask me to spoon feed you the information. And I feel like in this instance, that's a great opportunity. And from all of the, in case you didn't notice it, the subtext or maybe the blatant text in all of the answers that these authors gave was they actually have given this information a lot, and they have it available on their websites and on their Discords and in the places that they frequent. So for new and aspiring authors, if you have questions, do a little bit of research before reaching out personally to any author, so that you're not feeling like you're coming across as someone who doesn't actually care about what they're doing, so that they can tell that you've actually spent some time looking at this and researching it, and the question that you have is specific to something that they need to know, so that they might be able to help you with specifically. So go to their places, read their blogs, read the stuff, that the information that they have on their Discords, so that you can have those answers potentially and not have to bother them with an inane question that they don't care about. And then when you connect with them, is that much more pleasurable for both of you. All right. So we're going to jump off of that. Sorry for my rant because I feel it's important. We're going to hop over to KT. Hannah wrote a question that said, "Is writing for serialization hard to keep pace with?" When I was when I were when I wrote, I was just writing a book, but now I'm aiming for serialization, and it feels different. So, JM, why don't you head us up with your response to this about keeping pace on writing serialization?
The answer is yes. You don't know you don't know how stressful writing can be until you have constant, never-ending deadlines. That really changes the process. The best thing that I can say is that don't take on too much more than you can. And this is coming from the guy that took on too much more than he could. I vowed to myself when starting Fool, I'd never miss a day, and I've kept to that, but it has been punishing. And it's one of those things where you might look at your serial and go, hey, best strategy is to release 5 days a week. But if you can't put out 5 days a week and remain healthy, it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do the story any good. And it's not going to do the readers any good. So picking a schedule that can work with your rhythm, maybe a little bit challenging to yourself to build up that muscle, is the best way, I think, to transition to a serialization process which has constant deadlines. But yeah, if you take on too much, it can be incredibly punishing. So you have to be careful.
Yes, that's good. Selkie.
So I've, given similar things to what JM was saying. I'll add in, know what your pace is and go slower than that. If you want to write 5 chapters a week, for example, you need to be in a position where you can regularly write 7 because life is going to kick you in the nuts. Your basement is going to flood. Your door windows are going to break. Your cat is going to get sick. Your kid is going to end up in the hospital. And either you're running at such a punishing pace that any little hiccup, gets you, missing chapters, at which point you start to develop a reputation among your readers as being unreliable, given that readers are a little cagey on Royal Road, given the gigantic mountain of bodies all of our stories are on top of, and how many failed half stories are out there. So readers start to see, some hesitancy, some, missing stuff, and they're just like, oh man, it's going to be another one of those. So be slower than you can, because this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I have been writing, 3 chapters a week with some admin week for 3 years and going now. Every single week. There is no breaks. There are no time off. The reader expectations is there will be a chapter Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like like the Holy Bible. And once you start missing it, your reputation just goes, and it's bad. Jam, I'm very impressed. For example, you always get 5 chapters out a week. I personally have quite a bit of flexibility for getting punched in the face because my wife works. I have a kid. I have a cat. I was doing moving. So I've built in a lot of flexibility to get punched. And I would say the same thing. Have the flexibility to be punched and have the flexibility to take a breather, because it is a marathon. It is not a sprint if you are trying to write one of the gigantic epics. Now, if your story is short, if you've got a punchy 80K story that, you're just going to take the world by storm by, yeah, you can sprint that. You cannot sprint The Wandering in 12 million words.
Very good point. Yeah.
Pace yourself, know your limits, try to push them. Sometimes be like, okay, you know what? I'm really getting 4 chapters every week out really consistently. Let me see if I can do 5 and do it a little bit. Build your backlog with those 5 a week in case something happens, because something will happen. And you know what? If you find yourself really able to do that, bump yourself up. But know your limits.
That's fantastic. Good advice. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
I think when it comes to not taking any breaks, You do see authors like going on a temporary hiatus, like, oh, I'm taking off the month of December, I'm going on vacation, whatever, story will resume in a month. I think that I've generally seen this happen, I guess, somewhat successfully with like the largest of stories. Um, people like who are like absolutely like the biggest juggernauts. Um, but you definitely will have attrition if you come back after like a month for like pretty much everyone else, which is kind of going back to what the others were saying about needing to have that consistent momentum because readers, it's a fast-paced world and they want to read their daily chapter or they want to read their consistent at least like weekly chapter or something. So it is hard to maintain that kind of pace though, especially for someone who hasn't like serialized before. It's hard to get a sense of how to actually do that and how to maintain that momentum. And then also one of the problems with having a really big backlog is it actually goes back to the question earlier about, hey, like, do you ever feel like you want to like change your story? Well, if you're like an entire book ahead in your backlog and then people are making a really good point about like, hey, this is not good, and you're like, well, crap, there's a whole book of that nobody's seen yet, and then you can try to make changes, but like it definitely makes you less adaptable the further you are ahead, which kind of goes back to I think what Selkie was saying about like it's not just having a backlog, it's just being able to stay on top of it consistently, like from week to week too.
I want to actually touch on something Lauren was saying about backlogs and oops, people are telling me it's bad, but I'm a book ahead. I think I'm the most aggressive writer in terms of how many beta readers I have, where I have right now 6. It used to be 10, but I lost some backlog in the move. I have 50 to 100 beta readers for my roughly third of a book ahead that I am even ahead of Patreon. And I've recruited them mostly on the basis of they will hit me over the head and tell me this is bad, go change something. And recently they did that actually, where they were just like, Selkie, what are you doing? This is bad. Go fix it. And I was like, oh, okay. I have to go in and fix it. And there's a bit of a balance between no, I have a vision here, I am doing it, I'm going to plow through regardless of what people are saying. And there's also needing to know, no, actually, I'm an idiot and these people are right. Let me go un-F my, un-F my story. So you got to balance it, and it's hard.
Yeah. So before we get to Tao here, there's a question that kind of it fits right in with what we are just talking about here, where Doug says, I post every 2 days. Should I maintain that cadence, or are people more focused on particular days of the week? So Tao, sum us up here and then see if you can address
Yeah, I
this
was
a
going to say,
little
I'm not probably the person to ask about that because I don't get the same level of stats that the Royal Road is. I'm not posting on Royal Road anymore, so I don't get those informations, and how I'm going about it is very different. I don't really have a lot more to add to what both Selkie and Lauren have mentioned.
Yeah, they did a really good job of covering that, didn't they?
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that I find writing serialization a little easier because it's a little more slice of life. And so I don't have to plot as deep ahead, or my scenes aren't as compact either. When I'm writing for Climbing the Ranks compared to writing for 1,000 Li, you know, and it's a very different kind of feel. It means that it's easier to put out chapters for me, at least, compared to when I'm trying to write something like 1,000 Li or one of my more complicated works, which are meant for novels, because I'm compressing, doing time skips, and so on and so forth in there. And I don't have the same level with serialization.
Okay, so let's shift gears then. And JD Jerson is asking Jorson is asking a question here. Have any of you dealt with people stealing your serialized stories and putting them up using shadow accounts on Amazon? If so, how did you deal with that? Also, late to the panel, sorry if it's been addressed already, which it hasn't, which is why we're addressing it now. So, Lauren, let's start with you, and then we'll work our way around.
So nothing I've written has been stolen that I'm aware of. You have to realize that it's happening. Of course, there's actually a Discord server where people who know that stories have been stolen have been placing story links and stuff. So people are definitely trying to track it and pin it down.
Mhm.
But it hasn't happened to me, thankfully. And I hope that eventually there's a crackdown. But
Good. Has it happened to any of you?
Sorta.
Sorta. Okay.
So
Yes.
something I've been trying to keep the focus on me and Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons and not going on side tangents, but like Tao has Starlit Publishing and Kerlix has Time and Swin Publishing, I run Mango Media Publishing, where I've collected a couple of other stories that I've put on, and Ravenstagger, a name that some of you might be familiar with, had Lever Action stolen and put it up on Amazon. And I saw red, and I had to go get it taken down, and I went through the whole process. I wrote up a great big post on our progression fantasy about it, actually, which I'm trying to pull up now, and I'll probably post in the chat in just a minute, where I went through the details of how to get it taken down, how it was put up, how it was identified, and as Lauren was saying about the Discord server for tracking that, I actually organized that and set it up in the first place,
Mm.
where I tried to make an easy guide, an easy flow process, a 3-step. Follow these steps to find idea story, and then send this particular letter off to the author, which contains a detailed guide on how to fix it.
That's awesome.
To try to fix it. So that's what I've got to say on that. So one story, a little bit of work. I wouldn't call myself particularly experienced, and I had resources that most people don't have.
Right.
Although I don't think those resources did anything. And that's what I've got.
Awesome. Jam, you were saying there?
Yes, sorry about that. What I was saying was that yes, we did have Runeseeker stolen, as a matter of fact. Luckily, we were incredibly lucky in that a reader caught it, I think, within the day that it was published or the day after. And this is one area where I found having a publisher was absolutely fantastic, because I just went to my publisher, Rhett of Athon Books, and he had it taken down within like a day or two. It was just gone.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, it was very, very handy. But it is something you're going to have to be conscious of in the future for all those starting to serialize. The Chat GPT has with a scraper and Chat GPT, people are now able to rip a story off a serialized website, change some words and the slight phrasing, and then try and publish it as their own. And that seems to be the new grift. So just be aware that it does seem to be a trend right now.
Mm. Yeah, it's super important, right? We're dealing with that all the time now with AI and people trying to, it's not like it's any new thing. Plagiarism has been around for forever, but it seems like there's been tools that have made it that much easier each and every time we turn around. So we're at the 5-minute mark now. We're coming to an end for this panel, and I want to say a great big thank you to all of the panel guests that we've had on here, and I want to give them the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what they're working on now, what they're excited about coming out in the future, and where you could find all of the stuff that they have that is awesome. So we're going to start with Selkie. He's going to point at his little sub thing there, and maybe that's all he's going to do. Maybe he'll tell you more. We'll find
No,
out.
it's just Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons. It's in the header. I have one story. I'm focused on that story. It's what I do. That's it.
Awesome. And you can find it on
Royal Road and Amazon. And as I said, number 1 popular this week.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Lauren.
So my one series now is the Manoct Loop, which is also in my header. I'm working on the 7th book of that now, which should be the final book in classic web serial format. It kept getting longer and longer, but that's the plan. So you can also find me at timelesswinds.com, which has like links to my Discord server and all sorts of other things on my author page. And you can also sign up for my newsletter to get a free novella.
Free novel. Yay!
Novella. So it's a little
Novella, sorry. Free novella. Yay! I didn't go quite as high. There, does that help? Tao.
You can find Climbing the Ranks, which is the serialized work that I'm working on, which is on Starlit Publishing. That will actually be published on um, Amazon and Audible and a bunch of other places on December 1st. So you can read either one in either places. It'll always be free on Starlit Publishing.
Fantastic. JM.
So, unlike my esteemed colleagues who are all publishers, I am a scrub. So you can find me on Amazon, and that's basically it. Facebook as well, just under JM Clark. But the two series that I have on there are my new series, a lit RPG series called Rune Seeker, that I co-wrote with the always wonderful Carter J. Thompson, as well as my old classic Mark of the Fool. And others will come in time, but they're not out yet, so who cares? So we'll talk about them when they're relevant.
Now, I feel it incumbent upon me as a narrator. I have to ask, because it wasn't mentioned by any of you, are any of your books available on Audible or in any audio format at all?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
I was like dead space. I'm like, I know that some of them are, so there better be some responses here. Don't
We,
leave me
we
hanging.
briefly thought about just letting you hang there awkwardly for 5 minutes.
I know.
But
Yeah.
Steve
People
there
like,
being our strongest soldier, but keep going.
people like to leave me dangling a little bit, it feels like sometimes. Hurtful and mean, but that's okay. I'm Canadian. I can take it. I want to say a massive thank you to our panel guests today. That was some wonderful information. I really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your schedules, out of your busy writing serialization schedules, to talk to us about what you do and what you are so passionate about. And I want to again say thank you to Geneva, who has been working tirelessly behind the scenes, providing us with the links on these chats, setting up these chats to begin with, and this entire con. And she has been amazing at dealing with all of us and wrangling a herd of cats that are authors and narrators. So a massive appreciation to her. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a wonderful rest of the con and afternoon. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.